Welcome to another fantastic episode of the Fantastic Mr. Podcast. In this one, we talk about some of our favorite film techniques and how cinematographers use the camera in some of our favorite movies. I'm Jake, and I'm here with Zack and Justin. Say hey, guys.
Yo.
What's up? I like the intro. The intro is awesome, by the way.
I know, it's a little something we're trying. Let us know if you like it, guys.
I'm going to leave the part in there.
Oh, Jesus. All right. Well, anyway, film technique, specifically camera technique. Sometimes you just watch a film and for whatever reason, how they use the camera jumps out. At least it does to me. What about you guys?
Here's the thing is I do notice that kind of stuff, but I do this weird thing where I listen to the dialogue a lot, and in my head I'm writing a script. Like I'm almost transcribing it. So that's kind of what and the music. I focus on the music. Now there are things that do jump out to me, like I've mentioned Wes Anderson on this podcast before, and the way he uses a camera is I love it because he doesn't do a lot of like handheld stuff. All of his stuff is mostly on a tripod, so whenever we get like a pan, it's very broad. You totally notice it, and it's always like it seems like it's almost always like from one side of a setting to another. You know what I mean? Like it's a huge pan, or we get these giant zooms from Wes Anderson. I've noticed is like someone could like turn and look at the camera from a distance, and then we zoom all the way into him. So with like Wes Anderson, that's his cinematography is very, very specific, very, very like I don't know how to explain it. Noticeable for sure. So
yeah, it is. His style almost gives a sense of just like almost like a fairy tale aspect to it. Like everything is just a little bit more, say, larger than life. Everything's just a little more fantastical, a little more airy, a little bit more just like, I think we've mentioned before, it's almost like a pop-up book on film.
Well, for me, it's like watching a painting.
Oh, okay.
Like especially with this most recent movie, The French Dispatch, there's a scene where like there's a huge brawl in a room, but instead of everybody fighting, he has them all like in fight poses, but they're standing still, and he's like scanning the room, and it's really
like
cool.
A freeze frame?
Yes, like a freeze frame, except for it's not the camera freezing, it's the people. And they're all just standing there. Like they might be standing with like holding up, like getting ready to punch somebody with their mouth wide open or something like that. It was really cool. Like to me, it's like watching a painting, watching artwork happen in front of you.
Did you say that director uses in some shots come across as symmetrical?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a different director.
No. Wes Anderson's all about symmetry. Like
symmetry.
Yes.
What's the importance of that? I mean, what's the stylistic
I don't think
choice and reason for that?
I think it's just his brain, like it's just the way, I don't know. Like, I mean, it's cool because like he takes the rule of thirds to the extreme, you know what I mean? So there's no experimenting like with different types of, like his experimental movie is doing everything like symmetrical. Because like with normal movies, yeah, we might follow the rule of thirds, but it's a little off. You know what I mean? With Wes Anderson, it's not. Like it's perfect. It's almost like if you were to snap a picture of it, you could hang it on your wall as a poster or a painting or whatever, and it would look like very symmetrical. It looks great.
Every frame of his movies could be worthy of putting up on your wall. Sounds like.
I would totally do that. Remember that project I had to do, Zach, that I asked you to help me with? We had to go to that store. Remember?
No.
We went to the grocery store and I took a picture of you getting into the fridges.
I do not remember that. It must have been What happened to me? Did you drug me or something?
I guess.
I don't remember that. I really don't.
Somehow
I would remember that at a
Somehow
grocery store.
Yeah, somehow I drugged you through text message and got you to go to the store. It was at Edwards Place in Little Rock, and remember
I kind of remember that grocery store though. Yeah.
I took a picture of him, and like this wasn't a Wes Anderson movie; it was a Paul Thomas Anderson movie. It was Punch Drunk Love, if you guys have ever seen it, and it's a very, very wide shot, right? And all you can see is like you can't see the floor, and it's a movie with Adam Sandler, and he's wearing like a blue tux. And you and you can't see the floor or anything. All you can see is like this wide row of those fridges, like you see at grocery stores, as well as the lights above. And it's a really cool shot, really cool use of the camera, and it essentially like ultra wide screen. And that's one thing about Wes Anderson that I also like, and we've talked about this on the podcast, Jake, is like if I could make every shot of a movie a wide shot, I would do it. 14 millimeters, my best friend, love it. And so like that's my version of like good cinematography. It was everything's wide, you can see everything. Yeah,
I want to make a movie like that.
I do too.
We should do that. Just see if we can do it.
You should try all genres with that.
We could do anything we put our mind to.
All genres in wide shot.
Yes.
Well, that's the thing, and that's one of the reasons.
I want to see the action sequences without the constant cuts. Well, I think John Wick series that series does a pretty good job of showing the action, unlike perhaps the Dark Knight trilogy, which you can't tell what's happening in the fights for the most part.
I think you've hit on something interesting, Zach, because one of the reasons I wanted to talk about how cameras are used is because different genres use cameras differently. Like Justin, you just mentioned Wes Anderson has this very painterly technique where it's lockdown shots, zooms, pans, but the camera itself is generally at one point. And he also generally allows action to happen on camera.
Right.
A lot of his shots are when someone is speaking, it cuts. It's usually a one shot directly to them, but directly in the center. And when someone else speaks, it cuts directly back. There's no over the shoulder. There's no cutting back and forth to get the reactions. It's generally a person says their piece, this other person responds, and each person gets the entirety of the frame dedicated to them. Whereas if we talk about an action movie like Batman or TV series like 24, Jack Bauer,
horror flicks.
I've never thought about
bunch of horror movies.
Yeah, horror movies. They each have these different stylistic what am I trying to say? It's like stylistic patterns that cinematographers use. Right. Action films, you can expect a lot of quick cuts, a lot of action. Or in the case of like John Wick, some of them are now paring that back and they're doing long takes or wide shots specifically so you can see the actors. Usually when they actually have the actors doing the stunts, they get that full frame. I found a lot of action movies when they use doubles or if maybe an aging actor like Bruce Willis or Samuel Jackson or someone like that, they'll use a stunt double or something like that, and they'll generally do a lot of quick cuts because they don't give the viewers time to see who's actually doing what information, and then they just kind of bombard them with all these shots. Whereas, something like John Wick, who trained extensively to do these stunts himself, they did these long takes, wide shots, where everyone was in the scene, everyone's in action, you can actually tell. And that is a tool that cinematographers use in relation to what they have available to them. Like, can Samuel L. Jackson do this stunt? If not, let's get the double. But also as a tool to stylistically tell the story that they want to make.
And what do you think about these different styles of cinematography? And I guess you feel a different emotion, perhaps, as a viewer. I guess depending what's happening on screen. Like, for example, I don't know, like watching, I like to use the John Wick because I love those movies. I mean, if you were to see an action sequence in the quick cut style that we see a lot in typical action movies or what we see on television, I feel like it would give me a different reaction. I don't know. I think I would still enjoy it, but there's something else completely enjoyable about seeing everything play out on screen and seeing each henchman as they get punched or stabbed or shot, and just watching what they're doing after they're taken down. Whereas in the quick cut style, you just see someone getting shot or the punch, and it's harder to grasp. It's more chaotic. I feel like it's more, I guess, tolerable to understand the whole bigger picture if you just see everything that's happening. Mm-hmm. And I think it depends if there's taking bird's eye views versus nice panning shots. I think the John Wick franchise, I don't know who the cinematographer is, but whoever it is, they have an excellent style. And in the Nobody movie, I think that the guy that plays Saul,
Bob Odenkirk.
Bob Odenkirk.
Yep.
That movie does an excellent job too with the sequences, especially the one when he gets on the bus and encounters those young dudes.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's funny. Yeah. It's a little bit more tongue-in-cheek than the John Wick series, but I can see that series merging one day with John Wick's.
Doing a crossover.
Yeah.
That'd be funny.
What are you guys' thoughts on how the cinematography and how you would react to a scene if it was done differently, and how you feel as a viewer?
So what comes to mind for me when you mention that are horror movies. So like The Conjuring and stuff, where we get right before a scare, it's not necessarily, we're not doing like a wide shot or even a medium wide shot. We're most likely close up so that we can't see what's coming. So that helps build that suspense inside you. I think of also video games like the original Resident Evil, where you didn't follow necessarily behind the person, or you did, but you didn't, like if you turned a corner, then you had to wait to see what was coming up. It wasn't just instant. And so you could turn the corner and not see what's coming up until you've turned that corner, and then all of a sudden there's a zombie there and you have to kill it.
You think that style becomes a bit too formulaic and predictable at times? The scared person in the room. Let's pan over. Let's pan back. I'm waiting for the jump scare for whatever to pop out. It's like I get tired of those predictable scenes. But if they're done in a different way, if I've already enjoyed the story, then I'm a little bit more forgiving. But in general, I've noticed, not even just with horror films, but with other genres, there's predictable leading up to reaction type sequences that it just, okay, I've seen that before, but how is it done differently?
Yeah, I think that some people have started doing the thing where they build up this suspense. Not, it doesn't happen all the time. A lot of times it's like you said, pretty formulaic, but like they'll build up the suspense, and then something happens, but it's not like, something bad jumps out at them. It's like
it's a red herring.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, a red herring.
It's the little girl running. It's the little girl running across the room.
Yeah,
it's just your sister.
Exactly.
I love stuff like that.
Yeah,
that's one of my favorite. I'm sorry, Justin. Go ahead.
That's okay. So you're having all this suspense being built, and then when someone bursts through the living room door and it's your, like you said, your little sister running through, and you're just like, oh my God, you just put me through this. So now you're a little more invested, I think, because it's like, okay, well, if this is how they're going to play it, then I'll play the game. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So somewhat unpredictable at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm done. Go ahead.
Okay. I was like, I don't want to interrupt him.
Yes, I'm done.
But Zach, you asked, how we feel. I love stuff like that. I love when cinematographers kind of use that bait and switch, or they give an unusual or the unexpected frame for what should be going on. There's this one scene in Sicario where the protagonist and the antagonist are essentially having an argument outside of a kind of like a detainment center. And instead of having the traditional back and forth shot, over the shoulder shot, it's just this one long, wide, locked off shot, and they are way off in the distance, and you just see these two figures essentially just almost like two little specks, just having this animated argument. You can hear their voices, obviously, but they're just these figures out kind of in the distance. And the camera is not with them. The camera is kind of this vast emptiness space of like the desert where they're at. And it's not something you would traditionally expect for a scene like that, but it was used to kind of express the futility of what the characters were going through at the time. It was just a way of visually showing the emptiness of the actions happening on screen. Like, they weren't really important. The world around them was more important.
Yeah.
And they just happened to be inhabiting it at the time. Stuff like that's really cool to me.
Mm-hmm. It's awesome. I think Hereditary, have you guys seen that movie?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that movie utilized a lot of long held shots, like you're looking at a decapitated person and you're just staring at the head for a good 10 plus seconds, or worms coming out of some body. And
well, then you see it again, don't you? The head, you see it like the next day, and it's like started to rot. Yeah,
but
that was crazy.
It made you uneasy. The audience is just forced to have this in your face look of some disgusting thing on screen, and some strange ambient music in the background.
It kind of reminds me of the movie The Other Guys. Have y'all seen that?
That's with Will Ferrell, right?
Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg. But at the beginning, we have these two, like, what are you gonna, daredevil cops, play with a rocket Samuel Jackson, and then they do the thing where they're on a building, they're like aim for the bushes and they jump, and it's like one of those things where you're like, wait, where are they gonna, like, they're not gonna die, and then they die. And that's kind of how I felt with Hereditary. With her, she stuck her head out the window, I think, and then boom, head's gone. Like, I was like, holy I did not expect that to happen. And that's not necessarily, I know we're not really talking about that, but like, you made me think of that with The Other Guys when they jump off, and it's like this great, motivating, inspiring music, and then boom, they're dead.
But that's the way that the cinematographers were kind of leading you on. They were kind of leading you down this one expectation with the music, yes, but also just like the build up to it. And then they deliver something unexpected at the end. I love that.
Like in The Last Jedi, when you expect Luke to be so welcoming and he throws the lightsaber over his shoulder in a comedic fashion.
I can't.
It goes downhill from there.
I tried watching it again, and I couldn't make it past that. He threw it over his shoulder, and I was like, I can't do it.
Remember The Force Awakens with that beautiful helicopter, I assume, shot going around the island as Rey sees
walks up there.
Grumpy old Luke, and he grimaces.
And I think that's
it's a big lead up.
Different directors with two different
huge lead up. It's a huge
lead up, and it just results in this nice shot of Luke throwing the lightsaber over his shoulder.
But there's also use of camera movement as well. We talked about like leaving the camera in one place, but they also use movement in a lot of things. We've talked about cuts, we've talked about standing still, but like there's this one film that I really enjoyed called Upgrade.
Yes.
And they do, exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm not going to spoil it, but essentially a paralyzed man gets implanted with a computer chip that allows him to move. And because as the movie goes longer, he becomes more ingrained with this computer chip, the way that he moves and ultimately fights, because it's an action movie, starts to change. And one of the ways that they represent that is they actually have the camera roll and tilt with the man's actions lined like perfectly. So if he did like a backflip, the camera would do a 360 as well, perfectly in line with his body. I actually found a forum post from Andrew A.J. Johnson. He was the Steadicam operator for the film Upgrade, and he talks about how they got some of those shots made. And essentially what they do, or what they did, is they had the camera on his rig, and they used an application on the phone that follows the gyroscope of the phone. And so the phone could control the rotation of the camera that is suspended in his study rig. And so what they would do is they would take the phone, strap it to the actor's chest or his waist or his body part that they wanted to replicate the movement. And then when the actor did his jumps and his flips and his, everything, it would send that signal to automatically roll and tilt the camera so it stayed perfectly in line with what the action was doing. And that was a beautiful, just incredible way to show the audience how this man was being assisted by this computer chip. Because again, this man's paralyzed, he can't move, and so he's kind of experiencing all this movement as a passenger alongside the audience. And so by utilizing that kind of crazy movement with a camera that is lined with his body, it really represents how he was feeling on the inside, just being along for the ride, as essentially the computer was fighting for him. It's really, really cool.
It makes you much more immersed. Absolutely. It's a good movie. You should see it.
And there's other ways that that filmmakers can make distinctions using camera movement. For instance, in WandaVision, I love the behind the scenes for WandaVision. There is, if you have Disney Plus, they have a show specifically for the behind the scenes on how they produce WandaVision, and it's just so cool. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that they did is in the early episodes, which is set in the 1940s, because if you don't understand WandaVision, essentially Wanda has created this world for herself, and each episode is in a different decade. It's like it's kind of replicates sitcoms from those different decades, and the early ones were from like the 1940s. And they shot those episodes entirely using period accurate pieces of equipment. So they got the equipment from the 1940s, they got the lights from the 1940s. They filmed in front of an audience like a 1940s TV show. Mm-hmm. They literally replicated an entire set for that. But what they did for one particular character who was the villain, they did not use the period accurate equipment. Instead of having a lockdown shot, which is what you would consider for the 3-camera sitcom, they used a totally lost it. They used a boom arm. They used a crane specifically for this camera whenever she was on, because it separated this one person, this one character, as being outside the narrative. Whereas everyone else was in these locked off 3x1s existing in the universe, this one character got an entirely modern movement of camera, and it just subtly recognized or subtly showed that she was not part of the universe that was being controlled. And that's not something that pays off until way further down in the series.
I noticed in that series when things went sideways, so to speak, they would deviate from the traditional, trying to get the norm of whatever the cinematography was for that time. Yeah. And they would just, it's back to normal shots, close up suddenly. But it was done appropriately, like when things were, I guess, going sideways, as I said.
What other films or movies have you guys seen where the camera work or the lack of camera work really stood out to you guys and made you realize it? I know, Justin, you said you often think about the script. I'm a very visual person. Yeah. So I often think about the frame.
Well, a movie that comes to mind with really cool camera work is a movie called Hardcore Henry, if you've ever seen it.
Oh my God.
And it's basically an action movie, but it's all in first person, right?
It's so cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. And like I for my class, when we were talking about first person, when I was teaching high school, I showed a scene from that. And like, if you watch it, I mean, you can get kind of sick. in some parts, but then there's parts that are cool because he's like killing people all around him and stuff, and like just stabbing them and shooting them, and it's just like watching someone play Call of Duty. Like if you get on Twitch and watch someone play Call of Duty, that's all it is. It's just you see the hands, the guns, and reloading and loading and all this stuff, and it's a really cool way because you don't see that very often. I mean, you might see first person, pieces or parts in movies, but you don't ever see a whole movie done.
Certainly not action. Usually it's just like someone slinking behind bushes.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
around the corner.
Predator.
Yeah. It's like a stalker, very, very like far off, steady camish, kind of like that.
Breathing.
Kind of like Bob.
Yeah.
That you see if someone's just like slinking around. Yeah, no, that's insane. And the way that they shot that was incredible too, because they actually I think it was shot on GoPro. Do you know if that's true, Justin?
No, but I don't. I would assume that at least parts of it is shot on GoPro. I bet they did something special for.
I looked at the behind the scenes when it came out, and I think they shot the majority of it on GoPro, and it was really cool because they actually had the guy wear a helmet, and it was kind of a process because where his hands normally would be, you wouldn't see them. So he had to figure out this way to put his hands up and see the hands and kind of do these acting and cinematography at the same time.
Yeah, it was a really neat movie if you've never seen it. I mean, if you like those John Wick movies, Zach, you might like Hardcore Henry.
I remember seeing the previews when it came out. It was like 5 years ago at least.
Oh yeah, it's been a while since I went and saw it in theaters. Me and my friend did, and it was cool to watch in theaters.
I just Googled it. 13 people wore a custom GoPro rig for the action.
Yeah, that's cool.
So they had a team of people with a custom GoPro rig.
Yeah, Henry probably wasn't played by one person. That's cool.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's the movie that came to mind with some special, something you don't see every single movie. Like I said, like even in like the movie Doom with The Rock, there's a first person sequence, right? But the whole movie's not in first person because the game's in first person. So they're like
little nods.
Yeah.
They did that with the Halo show as well, at least in the one episode
in the first
I watched.
episode. Yeah, they did do that with the helmet because that's what you see in the game. So they made it look like the game. That was really cool.
I feel like Iron Man might have had some little bits, or is it usually just see his face in the suit?
I don't remember. Yeah, well, you know what? There was some kind of first person. Whenever I vaguely remember him like falling, and you could see inside the helmet out through the eye holes. You know what I mean? When he's falling,
when his suit gets iced over.
Yeah, and so I forgot about that. That's pretty cool. Because you don't see much because the eyes are like this big, and so you only can see barely anything. But still, it was kind of a neat piece of cinematography in a Marvel movie because like a lot of Marvel movies are pretty standard when it comes to cinematography.
So. I'm a big World War II historian buff, and I've read a couple books about the Holocaust, but there's this one movie from, I believe it's 2015, called Son of Saul, and it really stuck with me for just the emotional impact. It's about the concentration camp established in Auschwitz in Poland, and that's one of the most prominent and known concentration camps where at least 1 million Jewish people were just slaughtered by the Nazis. But cinematography-wise, it's just fantastic. It's a close-up shot throughout most of the movie of the protagonist who's working as a worker for the Germans and doing hard labor, and it's just a constant immersive experience, and that you feel claustrophobic at times as you're following this particular prisoner around, and there's a shallow focus, and you hear shooting and you see people in the distance, but you don't get a full look at what's happening. You might just hear, so it makes it a little bit uneasy as a viewer, as you're only seeing essentially what's in the frame, which is usually this guy's face, and seeing his reaction to everything that's happening around him. I don't want to spoil much, but I mean, there's this You got to see it to understand. But that's the first movie I've seen where majority of the film is this particular claustrophobic shot of the protagonist and the people that he's interacting with. And for a movie like this, it makes it even more horrifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's not like some horror movie, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's like real stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to read a little excerpt from this NPR article I found. Let's see. The camera stays tight on this man who's ushering people silently. A red X painted on the back of his jacket marks him as a Sonderkommando, a prisoner who's being forced to work with the guards. What's another bit is interesting. The director's technique is to shoot almost the entire film in severe close-up on his leading man, which has the effect of putting you next to him. But also, because the director uses very shallow focus, has the effect of making the atrocities around him blurry and indistinct, which sounds as if it would make the film easier to watch, but actually makes it all the more horrific because you can't focus on what you're hearing. So the kind of
that's cool.
The unknown of what's happening visually, but you could hear what's going on. So I like when cinematography just balances and perfectly just melds together with other aspects of film, such as the music or this overall sound, the ambience. So this film, I think, it's a good. I would recommend it for like a class, even for people, just for the particular way it was shot.
What's this movie called?
It's called Son of Saul. It's a Hungarian film. You probably have to find it in like YouTube and rent it or something. But
I haven't seen Son of Saul, but a similar technique is used quite often in The Handmaid's Tale on Hulu. They use a lot of really close-up shots with shallow depth of field on the maids' faces as well. For a similar reason, for what you talk about, it really makes you connect with the character on screen and the emotions that they are fighting through as all this horrible stuff goes around them. That's just a fantastic example, Zach.
And like, how are they doing this? Like the cinematographers, what kind of lenses are they using? Are they close up in their faces? How does that work?
Yeah, so they'll often get the camera close and use a fast lens. So in other words, a lens that has a very wide aperture. The camera is wide open. It lets lots of light in, and what that does is it creates a very small sliver of what is actually in focus. And because they're so close, that sliver becomes very, very tight with not much wiggle room. And so it really takes a dedicated cam ob and a focus puller to get that correctly, because if you don't get that correctly, it can ruin an entire film. A good example of, in my opinion, a film being ruined by that technique is Zack Snyder's zombie film. What is that called?
Zombieland, right?
Dead. Army of the Dead.
Army of the Dead, correct. I hated that film because I felt like they could never get their subjects in focus. He shot with, I think it was like a point, I forget what lens it was, but it was like 0.8 or 0.9. And Snyder, I mean, to his credit, he did something new. He tried to expand his horizons, but he acted as the director of photography as well as the director. And I just think it shows because he didn't get a experienced cam op for this, and he missed a lot of focus. You know, again, this is his first time doing this. He's an incredible director. I'm not knocking him as a guy, but in this particular instance, it kind of ruined the film for me because I felt like I could never get a focus on what was actually on screen.
Yeah, I did notice that a little bit. I think because I watched it with a friend of mine, and we noticed that some things were out of focus. And it was really weird because you don't expect big budget movies like that to be out of focus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that until you brought it up. That's interesting because I didn't know that he was serving as his own DP.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably the issue there, is especially if he's never done it before, like never done it on like a film like this. That's crazy. I didn't know that.
I love that he tried. Like I love
kudos to him.
tried to do it. It's just like, especially in a story like that being so big budget, like this obviously was a passion project for him.
So what does that mean as director of photography? Is he actually operating the camera, or is it he's just providing guidance on what he wants?
Probably a little bit of both, I would think.
It depends on how big of a production you're on. Oftentimes, if it's a smaller production, they're often the lead photographer or the lead cam op as well. If they're on a large budget, they're in charge of a team and they have the final say on whether or not a frame looks good.
You'd think the team would recognize these out of focus shots, and I don't know.
Apparently not. All in all, it's Zack Snyder's say. If he thinks it's not out of focus and he wants to use it, he can keep it.
True.
Yep.
And he probably didn't. I guess he didn't notice. And there was no quality control, and he might have. I don't know if he edited the movie himself, but I don't know. I did notice that in the movie, and I thought it was really weird because it's like, if you're going to try this on before you try it on a big budget movie, why don't you make a couple short films, and then whenever you have the art down, then go ahead and try it, in a movie.
He wants to experiment with the big movies, I guess.
I feel like there wasn't much oversight in that film at all, because there was also like dead pixels throughout.
Yeah.
Which also got under my skin.
Yeah.
Like you can fix that. You can literally fix that in post. You can do that. It'd be annoying, but if you're making a movie at this budget, like, take the time to do that.
Isn't that the movie where they CGI'd someone in?
Mm-hmm.
See, that's the thing. That was incredible.
What was the story behind that? What happened there?
That looked really great.
That was fantastic. On the one hand, you have this amazing green screen work, amazing effects work. They completely removed an entire actor, completely replaced them with another person, made it look completely believable. And then you've got shots like 90% of the film is out of focus.
I don't know why they replaced that actress, or actor.
He was involved with some let's just say he was not a good person.
Gotcha. So they replaced him.
He was involved with some stuff.
So they're gonna replace Ezra Miller by March.
I mean, they could. Apparently, we have the technology. If they can do it on Army of the Dead, where they make it look almost seamless. Like
they just replace him with Grant Gustin.
Well, there's people that want him to be the movie.
I think I've seen the first 3 or 4 seasons of the TV show. I thought he was great.
Yeah, he is a good actor. I wouldn't mind it either, but I don't think that's going to happen. Well, the Flash is ending. Maybe it will happen. We don't know.
And with WB and Discovery overhauling everything, I could see that happening. So,
but the only issue I think with that, and I know we're not talking about this, is that we've introduced the movie Flash to the TV Flash. So Ezra Miller's been on an episode of the Flash, and so
but it was like 3 seconds.
Yeah, it wasn't very long. It was cool though.
Probably getting rid of Amber Heard and having more Batman scenes for Aquaman.
That'd be cool. I'm okay with that.
Excellent.
All right.
So we're just talking about movies that have been ruined by bad cinematography. Do you guys remember any films that you're just like, ugh?
I mean, the only thing that comes to mind for me is maybe such like found footage stuff, because sometimes even though it's like found footage, you can still control the camera work. So I get we want it to look authentic, but when you got someone running with a camera and you see the ground and it's like going up and down and looking at the sky and looking at the ground, all of a sudden it's like come on, you can control it just a little bit. Like we don't think that this is real, it's like the Blair Witch Project or Paranormal Activity. Like we don't think this is real, so it's okay to fudge up the camera just a little bit so we don't get sick.
Does it take you out of the experience if there's like water or blood on the lens in the shot?
I think that's really cool actually. Whenever something happens and we get water on the lens, I'm like, I guess it should take you out of the experience, but it doesn't. Not for me. Like I think it's kind of neat when I see that. It kind of adds to the. I don't know how to explain this, but to me it kind of adds to the realism of the shooting. Of the actual filming.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's like I could see for like a POV shot, like in that movie we were talking about. That was shot entirely, basically POV. The action flick. Was there instances of
Blood
stuff on the screen, blood and all that?
I think, yeah, I believe so. And it kind of, I don't really, I need to watch this movie again. If I remember correctly, there might have been, but it was kind of like a quick thing where it happened and then he wipes it off.
Like in Saving Private Ryan in the opening scene, Omaha Beach, there's a bit where they're all jumping out of the amphibious assault vehicles because obviously they're getting shot from the beaches by the Germans. And you're kind of simulating you're a soldier jumping off the boat and getting into the water and trying to get your backpack off so you don't drown. But I feel like that's like a great experience because it's trying to come across as if you're one of the soldiers trying to survive.
Yeah.
There is a very famous scene in The Pianist, 2002 film.
Great film.
With
Mr. Brody.
Yeah, Adrian Brody, where essentially he steps out and he's just walking kind of calmly through like this war scene, and blood gets splattered on the lens. Now, the rumor, the myth, I don't know if this is true or not, but the myth was that wasn't intentional, that they were filming the scene with all these explosions going off, and one of the explosions knocked some of the blood on the lens, and the director actually called cut, but because of how much noise was on scene, Adrian didn't hear him and just kept doing his scene. And since he kept doing his scene, the cameraman kept following. And then when they were in the edit bay, that's what they decided to put in, and that's what made the movie win all the awards. Was this scene that was...
That's what you call a happy accident.
Yeah. And I don't think, obviously, that's probably not the first... that's not the first example of that happening, but to my understanding, that's kind of what popularized it. And the myth is it all happened on accident.
I'll have to go back and watch that film.
Best things normally do happen on accident.
But you bring up an interesting point, Zach, because that's become more popular in a lot of different type of genres and a lot of different scenarios. And it's to the point where VFX artists are often required to intentionally add things like that into their shot to make it feel more real. So if let's say two superheroes are fighting and they're shooting lightning bolts at each other, they'll add in, lens accurate flares. So it makes it look like the VFX lightning is actually emitting light into this camera as if it was a real thing. Things like that ground the special effects into like the world of the film. There's a lot of effort that goes into that, and it's just another tool that they have at their disposal.
Do they use post-edit techniques to create shaking?
Yep.
Oh yeah,
they sure do. A lot of famous movies use that. I think one of the most famous is the Bourne series. They have shaky cam all throughout that trilogy, and I think almost, I'm not going to say all of it, but a lot of it was put in post. And you can tell because I think there's like one scene where Bourne and someone else is like sitting at a table, and the camera is just going all over the place. They're sitting at a table, and that's one of the things where it's not justified. Camera movement is often supposed to justify or is used to justify what's happening on screen. So if like there's an explosion, the camera will shake a little bit.
Exactly.
Or if someone's freaking out, then they'll do a slow zoom. It's to like represent what's going on. It's supposed to help tell the story. And when you use the camera in a way that's not justified, people are able to pick that out really easily.
Yeah. I was thinking I had seen that before, where that artificial shaky cam, but I can't remember where I saw it. But I do. Now that I guess we're not just now. We've been talking about cinematography this whole time. But I just thought of a movie where we basically, as a movie I taught, and we basically talked about the camera work mostly, and it was just mostly like first person, third person, omniscient, and all that. Or yeah, I think it's what it's called, omniscient. And it was a really cool movie, and like a lot of the camera work, helped with the emotion. So like, there's a scene. The movie's called David and Lisa, and it's about David who goes to a institution because his parents he thinks that if people touch him, then he's gonna die, and so his parents take him to an institution, so he can be helped with that. And there's a scene, and then there's Lisa who has multiple personalities, and one of them is like a little girl, and it was funny because there's a scene where there's an overhead shot, and they go to this museum, right? It's kind of like a field trip. Goes museum, and there's this statue of I think it's like a mother and a father and a little girl, and I don't know what I think they're like sitting or something, and she climbs up there with the statue and kind of like snuggles up to it. And, because she doesn't have a family, and, that's probably why she's doing that. And then it does this overhead shot of her doing it. And I said, well, what about this shot? Like, who would you assume is watching her? And the answer I was looking for was us. We're the audience. We're watching. But then someone said, God. And I said, oh. I was like, oh my God. Like, I didn't even think about that, and if it hadn't been for that shot, like that wouldn't even have come up, because it wasn't even on my brain that, oh, maybe God's watching her. And it was very interesting. If you guys haven't seen this movie, you should watch it. It's from 19 something. It's a 70s movie, or not 70s movie. It's a black and white movie. But it's a very interesting movie where you could talk about, the way it was made and the shots that were used a lot, like throughout the whole thing. It was pretty cool. And then another, of course, cinematography. We can't not talk about Citizen Kane, right? Because the movie, the story itself is pretty bland. It's about the rise and fall of a newspaperman. Great, but what made it a classic, and we've talked about this movie before, I believe, or maybe we haven't. What made it a classic was the way it was filmed.
Yeah,
and the things he did, the things that Orson Welles did to create such shots, like an audience, like he has a speech where he's in front of this big audience, but it's a matte painting with holes poked in it and lights coming through it to make it look like their heads are moving. So it's pretty revolutionary the way he did things. And like there's shots where it's just somebody's feet, they're talking, having this whole conversation, and we're just looking at these guys' feet. And he was real big on the like the deep photography. So
deep focus.
Yeah, deep focus photography. And so you could see everything in the background, from the person, who's in focus, all the way to like an office door, all the way in the back of the room. And those rooms, like, is like a newsroom. It's like if we were standing in the Channel 7 newsroom and I wanted to do a shot of you doing a stand-up, but I wanted to see everything in the background. And we can see the back wall, even like an edit bay, maybe inside of an edit bay. And you guys know, like, it's pretty far back from, let's say, like where my desk was before I moved, Jake. So from where my desk was all the way back, it's kind of what Orson Welles did.
Yeah, I might be able to see Barry in his.
Yeah, exactly.
I think he was in the one in the middle.
Yeah, he was.
He
was, and if he had the door open, we could probably see him. And so that was the cool thing about like when I first watched that movie, and we'll talk about this again, because I think Citizen Kane came out in the 40s, so we'll talk about it.
Yeah, that'll be coming up.
It's a great movie. I just remember the close-up shots that I was like, wow, in a black and white 40s film.
Yeah, because you didn't really see that. I mean, like, Birth of a Nation kind of brought the close-up to the forefront, where because it's a 3-hour silent film, and like close-ups weren't really a thing then. We'll talk about it more when it comes up in the next episode, but like Birth of a Nation kind of brought to the forefront the close-up and different types of shooting, because a lot of silent films were mostly like, medium wide shots. There wasn't a lot of close-ups. But then, Citizen Kane, Orson Welles, was pretty innovative with that movie. It's pretty cool. Like, oh yeah, I know what I was gonna say. When I first watched the movie, I was like, "What's so special about this movie?" Like, the movie was boring, but then I taught it and I did more research on it, and I was like, "Oh, that's why this movie's so good." Because, like, when it first came out, like, it was okay, but it wasn't like a box office hit or anything. It wasn't until like the '60s that people started noticing the things about Citizen Kane with the cinematography and the things he was able to do. It was pretty cool.
You know, I think we've touched on it before, and I might be wrong. We might have to cut this out. I think he was able to do some of the shots he did because he was able to use new film that had a higher ISO.
Oh, well, that's good. Yeah.
And so he was able to stop down his iris and get that deep focus, but still get the light he needed thanks to that new film, or the film that he utilized at the time. Because I think normally they shot with, I think it was like 100 or 150 or something like that, and I think he used like 200 or 400. Yeah, but things, you know, the way the camera is used can make or break storytelling. I just love when they're able to use the camera as a piece of information telling. Sometimes you watch a film and it's a good film, but it's definitely not the camera work that carries the weight. And then there are some films where they treat the camera like an actor. They put it in the sequence and they use the blocking and the movement of the camera in tandem with everything else. And when cinematographers do that, it just creates a more cohesive image, in my opinion. Again, I'm kind of one of those visually engaged people. So if camera work is not engaging to me, I'm more likely to zone out than if it is.
Yeah, I get that.
Do you guys have any final thoughts on kind of like how camera work is used?
You know, I've made movies where the camera sucks because I'm doing it, or you know, somebody who doesn't know. Luckily, on my thesis, I had a pretty good cinematographer. He was okay. He was better than nothing, I guess.
He was all right. He could have been better.
Jake was my DP on my thesis film, and like, yeah, and I was just thinking about it, and you know, of course, I had you 2 days, and I had somebody else, and I lucked out having two people who were really good at their craft. Unfortunately, the second guy, you got the colors right. The second guy didn't on Saturday, so I had to artificially create, you know, that color to match the rest of the movie because I wanted kind of like some yellows and stuff, oranges and stuff like that. So yeah, and I was just thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, I got pretty lucky with my cinematographers, my DPs for that movie because I mean, I think it looks great. Like every bit of it looks great. Not to toot my own horn or toot, you know, because I guess I wouldn't be tooting my own horn because I did it, but I did create this, you know, decide on what shots to do, and I just got lucky that I had somebody that could execute those shots the way I wanted it and then it come out looking, you know, really good.
Directors get a lot of credit for the way the movie comes out, and they should. Ultimately, they are the ones that are in charge of directing the actors and making the story flow the way it's supposed to. But not a lot of credit is given to the director of photography and the cam ops. A lot of times there are amazing ones out there that get a lot of credit, you know, but usually when someone talks about how amazing a film looks, they refer to the director or the producers, and the people who kind of, especially like the DPs or the cam ops who are in charge of making those actually look good, kind of get left in the dust sometimes.
That's because directors are better than DPs. I'm just kidding. All right, Zach, what about you? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, just like the one shot takes that often, sometimes, maybe not, it's not common, I would say, but I'd say The Revenant and Birdman among the
You mean the long take. Yeah.
Long takes.
Birdman.
Like those,
1917.
Birdman does it.
As well, yeah.
Birdman does it really well. I thought Birdman did a great job with the long take. I thought
Who does it 1917 is also a good example.
I guess I've never seen.
That's another great example of using the camera as a character. Because sometimes you watch the characters, and the characters see something before the camera does, and then sometimes you're watching it, and the camera sees something before the characters do, and it's this great interplay between,
Well, I like
the viewer and the people.
Yeah, I think that is meant for us. We're the other character. If we see something that the character doesn't see, the character in the movie doesn't see, it's clearly meant for us, right? Because that's what the camera's for, so we can see what's going on. But then there's times where we can see stuff that they can't, and it's so, we have this bit of information that they don't have. Yeah. So that's kind of goes hand in hand with the camera being a character. It's because I feel like the audience would be that character filling that spot.
Yeah, and luckily the story was interesting enough to where I wasn't like bored and wondering what was going on elsewhere in the world. Because I feel like if you tried that long take and through the entire movie strategy, then in other films, if you don't have the story there and the visuals, then I think you're going to lose. You're going to have people walking out of the theater, perhaps, or getting off the couch and doing something else with their lives.
I own that movie, and I should probably watch it.
You should. It's a good movie.
1917. That's what we're talking about, I think, right?
Yes.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I have that movie. I need to watch it. I just haven't. I know it's one of those movies that you kind of have to sit down and like kind of pay attention to. I think
it's an experience movie.
Film.
Yeah, it's an experience, exactly. And I want to indulge in that experience. I don't want to be on my phone, and so I should have went and just seen in theaters like a smart person, because I don't get on my phone when I'm in theaters like that. That going to the movie theaters is an experience for me.
Yeah, there's one scene I forgot specifically, but you're hearing someone getting stabbed and yelling, but the camera doesn't immediately show it, and then it pans over or walks over. Essentially, you see the guy getting stabbed.
Cool. I mean, not cool, but cool.
But overall, I'm a big sound guy, so I think that's one of the first things that I listen for. But
I think that's the first thing we all listen for is sound.
But yeah, absolutely. But I think sound and cinematography, they're just vital to the viewing experience.
Yeah, I think sound design.
If you had to have one or the other, I'd rather have the visuals, I guess. But it's a visual medium ultimately. But well,
I don't know. You can save a bad film with audio. But
music, Lord of the Rings, perhaps.
Sound design is super important. Like if you have crappy sound design, you may as well just pull the movie from theaters and redo it.
All right, let's wrap this up, guys. Thank you so much for listening to our little podcast.
You're welcome.
If you have something you want to tell us, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, OnlyFans coming soon. And let us know what you think. Have you seen some just really interesting camera work that popped out? Or have you seen an example of camera work ruining a film? We want to know. Let us know.
Jake wants to know.
Shaky cam sucks.
You don't have to tell me.
Thank you for listening. Have a fantastic day.